Have you ever felt like you were playing a game you never agreed to play? You text them, then wait in anxiety. An hour passes, 2 hours, then a whole day goes by, and finally, you get a short, vague reply. You start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Why are they warm one moment and ice cold the next? If you're listening to this and something inside you just tightened, I want you to hear me. You're not crazy, and you're not hard to love. You're simply caught in a familiar dynamic, the one between someone craving closeness and someone who fears it. This isn't a talk about how to make them text back or tricks to keep them interested. This is a talk about your real power in a relationship, a power you may have forgotten you had. So let me tell you something clearly. Avoidants only keep their power as long as you don't realize you never lost yours. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you why their coldness has nothing to do with your worth, how your attention is the currency that keeps this entire game alive, and how to break free without chasing, without begging, and without losing your self-respect. When you understand this, everything changes. Not because you made them crumble, but because you stopped believing the illusion that you have to suffer to be loved. Let's begin. You might think avoidants are strong, independent, and fully in control of their emotions. They seem calm, mysterious, unshaken by anything. But the truth is, behind that silence and distance lies a defense mechanism, a deeply rooted fear of intimacy, a belief that closeness equals danger. To protect themselves from potential hurt, they create distance. And to maintain that distance, they unconsciously rely on one strategy: confusion. When their behavior swings between warmth and withdrawal, you start analyzing every interaction. You wonder, what did I do wrong? Why did they change? And while you're searching for answers, something subtle happens. You push your own needs aside and start prioritizing how to keep them close. This is the illusion of power. You believe they are in control, but in reality, they are simply reacting to their own fear. They don't pull away because you're not enough. They pull away because intimacy feels unsafe to them. Yet, the cycle strengthens because you interpret their distance as a judgment of your worth. And when you believe that, what do? You try harder. You text. You wait. You prove yourself. You convince yourself that if you're patient enough, loving enough, they'll change. But in truth, the more you do this, the more you unknowingly feed the illusion of their power, and the more you lose your own emotional balance. This illusion only survives when you forget that your real strength isn't in holding someone at any cost, but in knowing your worth even if they walk away. When you're entangled with an avoidant partner, you're not just dealing with their silence, you're dealing with the storm inside yourself. They pull away, and anxiety rushes in. They go quiet, and you search for explanations. Soon, you start believing the solution lies in doing more, loving harder, being more patient, proving your worth again and again. But do you see what's really happening? The moment you start chasing, you unknowingly hand over your power. Every text you send after they withdraw, every sleepless night spent asking, what did I do wrong, sends a silent message. They matter more than you in your own story. And this is what keeps the loop alive. They don't need to do much. Their silence is enough. You'll do the heavy lifting, filling the gap with effort and overthinking. Imagine this. In this game, your attention is the currency. Every time you react to their distance, you're paying for a relationship that doesn't give you emotional security in return. Avoidants aren't consciously manipulative, but they feel this dynamic. They're used to being chased, to having others prove love to them. This reinforces their deep belief that distance equals control. But look closer. Who's really doing the work here? Who's investing more emotional energy? Who's constantly trying to hold the relationship together? The answer is obvious. You are, and that's why you feel drained, anxious, and perpetually on edge. The key isn't about blaming them, it's about recognizing how this loop operates. When you start to see that their behavior isn't a verdict on your worth, but a reaction to their own fear, you realize something powerful. You don't have to play this game anymore. There is a moment in every emotional loop that few people notice. The moment you stop reacting. It's not a tactic to manipulate them. It's an internal awakening. When you realize their silence is not a punishment, that their withdrawal is not a reflection of your worth, you begin to reclaim your balance. Real power doesn't come from trying to pull them back at all costs. It comes from refusing to let their behavior dictate your emotional state. Picture this. In the past, every time they went silent, your heart dropped and your mind spiraled into analysis. Now, you look at that silence and tell yourself, this speaks about them, not about me. A small shift in thinking, yet it dismantles an entire power structure that's been in place for so long. When you stop chasing, the dynamic changes completely. Avoidants are used to you filling the gaps. They go quiet, you text. They pull away, you soothe. But now, the gap remains, and you don't rush to fill it. This forces them to face a new reality. They no longer control the rhythm of the relationship. What's fascinating is that this change doesn't come with fireworks. There's no dramatic confrontation, no harsh accusations. It's simply you becoming calmer, clearer, and less reactive. And that quiet steadiness takes all the power out of the game. This is the first step of healthy detachment, not as a punishment, but as a way to protect your peace. And once you enter this state, you begin to see something clearly. The power was never theirs. It was always yours. You just forgot it when fear took over. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood concepts. Many people think it means becoming cold, pretending not to care, or playing silent games as revenge. But that's not real detachment. True detachment is an inner state where you stop letting someone else's behavior dictate your peace of mind. Picture this. In the past, when they went silent, it felt like your entire world collapsed. You couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and your mind was consumed by questions. Why are they doing this? What did I say wrong? Detachment doesn't erase care, but it restores balance. You can still love, but you stop letting love turn into emotional dependency. This doesn't happen overnight. It begins with a shift in the questions you ask yourself. Before, you asked, how can I make them come back? Now you ask, why am I continuing to tolerate something that makes me feel unsafe? This subtle shift is powerful because it moves you from reacting to responding, from chasing to choosing. When you practice healthy detachment, you stop acting on impulse. You no longer feel the urge to text just to calm your anxiety. You start understanding that someone else's silence isn't a verdict on your worth. It simply reflects their own capacity or willingness for connection. And here lies one of the most important truths. Their silence is not a gap you have to fill with your sacrifice. Detachment doesn't turn you into someone unfeeling. It allows you to observe without absorbing every negative signal into your heart. You can care, but from a distance that respects your dignity. It's not about walking away from love, it's about stopping the habit of abandoning yourself in the name of love. When you reach this state, you begin to realize something profound. You don't need to win this relationship to prove your worth, because your worth has never depended on whether someone chooses you or not. If detachment helps you regain balance, boundaries are the tool that keeps that balance intact. Many people hear the word boundaries and immediately think of a cold barrier, an emotional wall. But boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about protecting your emotional space. A relationship without boundaries is like a house without doors. Anyone can walk in, bring their mess, and leave without accountability. When that happens, you're the one constantly cleaning up the broken pieces they left behind. Boundaries are how you install doors, not to lock people in, but to ensure that whoever enters does so with a minimum level of respect for your space. In practice, setting boundaries isn't about issuing commands or ultimatums. It's about saying clearly, I respect you, but I also respect myself. This might sound like, I need consistent communication to feel secure. If disappearing for days is what you need, I understand, but that's not something I accept in an intimate relationship. The key here is this. You don't say these things to convince them to change, but to define the standard for yourself. If they can't or won't meet it, you don't argue, you don't beg, you simply make a choice aligned with your values. Here's the big difference. Loving someone doesn't mean tolerating everything. When you fail to set boundaries, you silently agree to behaviors that keep you anxious. And every time you ignore that discomfort to hold on to them, you send a dangerous message. My worth depends on your presence. Boundaries don't kill love. On the contrary, they create the clarity love needs to thrive, a love rooted in respect, not in fear or confusion. When it comes to ambiguous relationships, what we experience today echoes questions philosophers have explored for centuries. Jean-Paul Sartre famously said, "Hell is other people." He didn't mean people are inherently bad, but that when we allow our sense of worth to depend on someone else's gaze, we become prisoners of their judgment. This is exactly what happens in an avoidant, anxious dynamic. You surrender your inner freedom because their silence or response dictates how you feel. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the will to power not as domination over others, but as mastery over oneself. In love, this means that true strength isn't in making someone love you, it's in maintaining your self-respect even when faced with rejection or uncertainty. When you set boundaries, when you practice healthy detachment, you embody Nietzsche's idea, choosing to govern your own life instead of dancing to someone else's inconsistent rhythm. Erich Fromm, in The Art of Loving, wrote, "Love is an active power, not a passive dependency." He emphasized that real love is not built on the hunger to be completed, but on the ability to give from a place of wholeness. This connects directly to our discussion. When you need someone to validate your worth, love ceases to be love and becomes an anxious contract. Only when you are full within yourself can you love without turning into a dependent self. Ultimately, these philosophical ideas converge on a single truth. Inner freedom is the foundation of healthy connection, and that freedom begins the moment you stop playing the game of control and return to the most profound question: who am I when no one else defines my worth? What most people don't realize is that this cycle doesn't end when the avoidant changes. It ends when you do. More specifically, when you heal. Healing isn't just about walking away or blocking their number. Healing is the process of reclaiming your inner power, the point where you stop seeking safety in someone else's reactions. When you heal, their silence no longer sends you into a panic because you no longer see it as evidence of your worth. You don't feel the urge to text just to ease the emptiness. And you stop spinning in the question, what's wrong with me? Instead, you look at the distance and think, this speaks about them. I'm still whole. Healing creates a peace in which the game of power cannot survive. Why? Because the avoidant dynamic depends on your anxiety. They're used to distance-triggering pursuit. But when you stop chasing, when your calm becomes louder than their silence, the entire foundation crumbles. This isn't revenge. This is freedom. When you no longer seek your worth in the eyes of someone who can't give you stability, you stop being trapped in a cycle of effort and disappointment. And here's the fascinating part. The moment you no longer need them to feel enough, you become the version of yourself you always wanted to be: grounded, clear, and unshakable. Here's a truth that surprises many. You don't lose them. You lose the old version of yourself, the one who believed love had to be earned through suffering. And when that version disappears, the fog of ambiguity loses its allure. What once felt intoxicating now feels exhausting. Healing doesn't guarantee every avoidant will rise to meet you. Some will leave because they no longer receive the fuel of your pursuit. Others might choose to step into the light of the consistency you embody. But that's no longer the point, because the game no longer revolves around them. It revolves around you and how you treat yourself.